600-year-old mummy around in a cooler bag. He says it's his spiritual girlfriend, and they had named her Juanita. It does make all sense. To go along with some of the stupid laws that are still out there on the books, I thought I'd add a few more this time. In Iowa and Fort Madison, the fire department is required to practice firefighting for 15 minutes before attending a fire. In Ottumwa, it's unlawful for any male person within the corporate limits of the city to wink at any female with whom he's unacquainted. In Kansas City, Kansas, saying the name George Washington without adding the phrase "blessed be his name" can land you with a fine of up to 50 cents. Also in Kansas, it's illegal to hunt whales. Don't worry. And it's illegal to put ice cream on cherry pie in Kansas. And in Kentucky, it's required for every citizen to take a shower at least once a year. Owensboro, a woman may not buy a hat without her husband's permission. And it's also illegal in Kentucky to marry the same man more than 3 times. In Louisiana, biting someone with your natural teeth is simple assault, while biting someone with your false teeth is called aggravated assault. It's also illegal for a woman to drive a car unless her husband is waving a flag in front of it. And in Maine, you may not step out of an airplane that's in flight. Someone that wrote those laws probably should step out of that airplane in flight. Working at the employment office must be a really tense job. If you get fired, you still have to come in the next day. A motorist was mailed a picture of his car speeding through an automated radar. A $40 speeding ticket was included. Being cute, he sent the police department a picture of $40. The police responded with another mail photo of handcuffs. As the man walked into a doctor's office, "What do you have?" asked the receptionist. "Shingles," he replied. She told him to sit down. Soon a nurse called him and asked, "What do you have?" "Shingles," he replied. She took his blood pressure, weight, and complete medical history. Then she took him to a room and told him to remove all of his clothes. After a few minutes, the doctor came in and asked, "What do you have?" "Shingles," the man replied. The doctor looked him up and down and said, "Where?" "Out on the truck." "Where do you want me to unload them?" Jeff had gone to propose to his girlfriend and returned home crying bitterly. "What happened, son?" his father asked, eagerly awaiting his response. "Did she accept?" "No, she sure didn't," sobbed Jeff. "When I told her what you advised me to say, she slapped me in the face and told me to get out." "Did you begin by telling her what I told you to say? What I told your mother when she accepted my..." "Sweetheart, time stands still when I look in your eyes." "Did you tell her that?" asked the father. "Oh boy, Dad, did I get it all wrong?" He said, "My dear, you have the face that would stop a clock." And some of us can probably relate to this one. Leaving the store, I couldn't find my keys. They weren't in my pockets. Suddenly, I realized I must have left them in the car. Frantically, I headed for the parking lot. My husband had scolded me many times for leaving my keys in the car's ignition. He's afraid that the car would be stolen. As I looked around the parking lot, I realized he was right. The parking lot was empty. I immediately called the police. I gave them my location, confessed that I had left my keys in the car, and that it had been stolen. Then I made the most difficult call of all to my husband. I left my keys in the car and it was stolen. There was a moment of silence. I thought the call had been disconnected, but then I heard his voice. "Are you kidding me? I dropped you off." Now it was my turn to be silent. Embarrassed, I said, well, come and get me. He retorted, I will, just as soon as I convince the cop that I didn't steal your damn car. That's a good one. Before check-in counter, I overheard a woman ask for a window seat for both she and her husband. The clerk pointed out that this would prevent them from sitting together. Sweetie, the woman replied, I just spent 10 days of quality time in a compact car, a rental car with this man. I know what I'm requesting. A big city lawyer was representing the railroad in a suit filed by an old rancher. The rancher's prize bull was missing from a section through which the railroad had passed. The rancher only wanted to be paid the fair value for the bull. The case was scheduled to be tried before the justices of the peace in the back room of the general store. The attorney for the railroad immediately cornered the rancher and tried to get him to settle out of court. The lawyer did his best selling job, and finally the rancher agreed to take half of what he was asking. After the rancher had signed the release and took the check, the young lawyer couldn't resist gloating a little over his success, telling the rancher, you know, I hate to tell you this, old man, but I put one over on you there. I couldn't have won that case. The engineer was asleep and the fireman was in the caboose when the train went through your ranch that morning. I didn't have one witness put on the stand. I bluffed you. The old rancher replied, well, I tell you, young feller, I was a little winning that case myself because the darn bull returned this morning. And I'd like to leave you with a couple of positive quotes. Stay close to anything that makes you glad you're alive. And what is the difference between an obstacle and an opportunity? It's our attitude toward it. Every opportunity has a difficulty, and every difficulty has an opportunity. Today's fine. If you don't have a tree in your yard, that's $1. If you've had blueberry pie this month, that's $1. If you've ever flown in an airplane, that's $1. I haven't been up here for a while, so I need money. If you have winked at another person that you didn't know, that's $1. If you've ever taken a cross-country road trip with your significant other, now that's for free. And if you're not wearing your Rotary pin, that's $1. Brandon, that word.
Hotel Friday writing them happy box. Dave. So happy bucks. I'm happy that tomorrow morning my one of my sons, my younger son, is going to graduate from Wright State University. Even happier that it brought my folks up from Florida to see. My dad, Mike Cusack, is a former Beavercreek Rotarian, and this is my mom, Doc.
See him now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got it. Hold on. Alex isn't here, but I think everyone knows we're having a little function for Alex this evening.
Yeah, down in the middle.
What time? 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock. So I wanted to congratulate him. I know we all are. There's a party going around. I also want to let everyone know that today is the start of Jump Fest in honor of Pee Wee Martin. He was, of course, the World War II vet who passed away at 101 just this past summer. I don't think they're jumping right now. They're hoping the weather breaks and they will, but this is at Slide Dive, Green County in Xenia. A great place. They'll have trucks there, reenactment. So if you get a chance, you want to go out there, even if it's not pretty, we'll go out there and enjoy it. And do you remember the weather here being this bad? You were supposed to bring some of the food right here.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yes, sir.
The proud dad moment this weekend tomorrow is prom. And so my son is getting all excited for it and because he's been nominated for the junior class prom king. So keep our fingers crossed and hope he brings home the trophy. I don't know what it is. Crown. He's excited for it. You're gonna have a good time.
Sir,
I'm happy to announce that we have submitted 2 grant requests, all comments with Eric's help. So hopefully we get them in.
My inbox has notified me.
And Brandon, you signed them in absentia.
Thank you so much. I think I've just signed everything Eric's put in front of me for a year. It's just blind trust.
I've got a couple of, kind of brag on, our daughter, Brennan, she's got a section in the MJHS. So, very proud of her and her 4.0 that she has. With that, and she also plays softball. She did just hit, 100 strikeouts on the year in 8 games. So very proud of her for that. And then the third one is that I get to spend a lot of the time actually with Jack Henderson because his great granddaughter plays with our daughter, at Bellbrook. So I'm very proud of her daughter. So thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Yes, sir.
Got a couple. My grandson's in Dallas this week for the National Robotics Tournament. So we're out in Beavercreek Schools in Green County. And that's where Andrew hunts at too, kind of watching over him. It's a pretty good honor. I'm a little concerned though that they might not be sponsoring that next year. You know, on account of money, naturally. And it's not Beavercreek Schools, but career centers. They might not be. But we'll see. They're having a good time. I got one other thing, Joe. You got a minute?
Yeah. Like I was Peter.
Protect your throat. It's like.
It's not scary.
Oh, that is awesome.
That's not what it is.
Joe is now a Kentucky colonel.
And so when Don was talking about all the stuff in Kentucky, I'm like, oh no, you know. So geez. That's.
This is good. You can leave.
Very good. Thank you.
Who else? Shannon.
So tonight is, this district, banquet. My happy butt was because it used to be a weekend event that ate a whole weekend, but now it's only a 5-hour banquet. So. Yay.
Wonderful. Anyone else?
Yeah, since I dropped $5, I got 2 more hobbies. First one tonight is the spring fling, and I want to thank the club for sponsoring that. It's a very, very important fundraiser for a very important organization taking care of battered people. And yesterday at the county commissioners meeting, we implemented our first prayer at the beginning of the meeting. And thanks to Dick and Tom, we took a few bullets for that, but it's the right thing to do. So we start the meeting off with a prayer, roll call, prayer, pledge, and then we get into business. And that seems to be the way we should be doing things here. So that was a good moment.
Joe, do we still have like spots available for tonight?
Oh, yes, thank you for bringing. I was gonna suggest it. We actually have 4 more seats open for night for spring fling. So if anybody wants to go tonight, we have 4 open seats. Just let me know. So I can let Amy know at Family Violence, so you can fill those seats.
It's a blast. It really is a fun time.
This is for the record, I sent this email out about 2 weeks ago. So the club sponsored the Family Violence Prevention Center Spring Fling, and that is tonight at 6 p.m. at the Greene County Fairgrounds. We were part of our sponsorship to have 8 seats to that event, and we still have 4 available if anyone would like to go. And it just said we invite you to celebrate spring, the life-changing services of the Family Violence Prevention Center. There's a silent auction, appetizers, and dinner provided by Christopher's. Drinks are provided by the Cincinnati Tap Truck, and there's a dessert dash finale. Yeah, and so the dress is casual. Tickets are $90, but they're $0 for 4 additional people if you would like to join tonight. And you can take a significant other if you like. So that's open to anyone in the club. Just let Joe know by the time or before you leave. Anyone else have happy bucks? Okay, I have one. Right before I came here, I finished my 7,500 word final essay for my MPA. So it's, if you were thinking like what I'm thinking, Alex is retiring, I'm finishing my MPA. Yeah, I think I might take a new job. So let's see. But no, I'm super stoked. I go to Bloomington next Thursday. I'll be back by Friday. Today, don't worry. I'm gonna run over there and grab my diploma. I want to see the campus I donated a lot of money to. And I'll be back. So yeah, I'm stoked. That's all I've got. Any last chance happy bucks? Okay, take a drawing. We've got 3, 2, 5, 0, 5, 4. Doesn't mind. That's where that table, like, starting to get very suspicious.
No.
There's the Queen of Hearts. Rose. Announcements. I have multiple. Monday morning, 7 a.m. coffee at Dunkin' Donuts. I'll try to send an email out this week and remind you, but I'll be there. Love to hang out. Founders Day dinner is May 12th. It'll be right here. Eric is asking that you register before May 8th. He sent out, I think, 2 emails with a link that just takes you right to it. Remember, it's just charged to your account. If you're rule of 85, you have to pay the full amount, 35. If you're non-rule of 85, you just pay the difference, which I believe is $19, and it's just billed to your account. I hope everyone can make it. We currently have 17 Paul Harris fellowships to pass out, or Paul Harris fellows to pass out. So very, very excited about that. Alex Zahara, again, his retirement tonight at 4 p.m. or a retirement celebration. That's at Stonehill Village over off Tree Line. The actual address is 1300 Short Hill Drive over at Stonehill Village. And lastly, last week there was a reader sign-up sheet. I need someone for June 2nd. June 2nd, you'll have the pleasure of hanging out with David Brandenburg. So if anyone would like to, just let me know. Sir.
I do have one announcement. Tomorrow, we're launching out the first honor flight of the season out at the airport. And if anybody would like to be there to welcome them back, we've got 81 veterans here. They're on this flight, and they should be in sometime after 7 o'clock tomorrow night. So just come out and find the crowd at the ramp coming out from the gates and
Dayton Airport, I mean.
Dayton Airport, right, yeah. And it's a good flight, a good program, and that's the first one for the season, so there'll be plenty.
What era are they inviting now? They're done with the World War II vets, right?
We're still getting some World War II vets and anything after
Vietnam.
Yeah.
Great program.
About 7.
About 7 p.m. tomorrow night, Dayton International for honor flight first of the season. Thank you, Terry.
They have a band and, the whole 9 yards, welcome them back, so.
Awesome. Last chance. Now, Joe.
I saw Allison's car.
I did not. Yeah, right over the back. Okay. No one else? I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Pete Bales for the introduction of our speaker.
Tonight we have an exciting speaker who was highly recommended after her speech to the Beavercreek Women's League. And so I'm very happy to read a little bit of her bio because it is quite extensive, and I'm sure we're going to hear some amazing stories. So I'd like to introduce Carrie DeFore. Carrie serves as an assistant director of clinical core at the Helen Fold Health Trust National Institute for Evidence-Based Practice in Nursing and Healthcare at the Ohio State University. Do you put that all on a business card? I mean, that's a.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's probably smart. She has served in that role since July of 2022. She taught and served as a facilitator for evidence-based practice course since 2014. Previously, she was assigned as a medical inspector, medical operations directorate, headquarters, Air Force Inspection Agency in Kirkland Air Force Base in New Mexico. She led teams that conducted medical component of the Air Force inspection system. Her primary responsibility was to assist in the unit effectiveness inspections of active duty and reserve medical units and aeromedical evacuation units worldwide, and to assess the execution of established Air Force standards and directives. She retired in June of 2021 as a colonel in the United States Air Force. She is a native of Madawaska, Maine. She commissioned as a second lieutenant through the Air Force Reserves Officer Training Corps at the University of Maine in 1995. She held a variety of positions at the squadron, group, and wing levels, trained hundreds of aeromedical evacuation students at the Air Force School of Aerospace Medicine, and was selected as a White House nurse in the White House Medical Unit and served as a nurse for President George Bush and Vice President Biden. On a separate note, she obtained her certification as a professional dog trainer in 2020. She owns her own dog training business in which she not only trains basic obedience family dogs, which I could use your services, but also her nursing skills and intuition to train service, emotional support, and pet therapy dogs for individuals with special needs. So quite an amazing background. I skipped a lot because I'm pretty sure we're going to hear some great stories. So everyone, please welcome Carrie DeFore.
Oh, microphone. Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. It's truly my honor to be here. Thank you, Don, for the nomination. And I also want to say I am from Maine, and I have never jumped out of a moving airplane. You don't have to jump out of a perfectly good airplane. So we're good with that law. So I'm really excited to be here. I have a pretty wide variety, and as you know, this was not my original home, but now I call Beavercreek my home. And so I really enjoy it here. This was the first place in my entire Air Force career that it felt like home. And so while my family stayed here, I was here back in 2010. This is what brought me over here, was actually getting an AFID assignment where I went to Wright State for 2 years, and the Air Force paid for 2 years for me to go to school and get a master's degree. And I just fell in love with the community. And so the Air Force wasn't done with me, and they said, okay, well, you've got to keep moving. And I said, but I want to stay here. And they said, well, that's really nice to hear, but you're going to have to go. So my family stayed, and I traveled on for another 6 years. And then I came back to this wonderful community, which now I call home. So and this is where I own the business. I have my dog training business is right up on it's in Beavercreek. It's right up on North Fairfield, right next to the new shooting range, Midwest Shooting. So we're in that plaza there. So it's very, very exciting to be here. So a little bit about me. Like I said, I grew up in Maine. I actually was born in Canada. So for those of you who may know me, when I was born, I was a little impatient back then too. So there was a choice of the nearest American hospital, which was 30 minutes away, or the nearest Canadian hospital, which was 3 minutes away. And when I said I was coming, I was coming. And so that's how I ended up in Canada. I stayed there for 3 days. So I had dual citizenship for a little while until I decided to commission into the Air Force. And they said, okay, well, in order to be an officer, you've got to give up your citizenship to one of those countries. And we're kind of hoping it's Canada because we want you to stay in the United States. And so that's what I did, and have been an American citizen ever since then. So before I do want to start with the story, I do want to say this is always an honor to be here at Rotary speaking, because I started out in my high school career, if you will. I was actually a junior Rotarian, and it was relatively new. Back then, when they opened it up, I was part of the first cohort as a junior Rotarian in Madawaska. And thanks, Pete, for actually pronouncing that correctly, because everybody looks at that name and just says the M place, because they really don't know how to spell, they don't really know how to pronounce it. But I really enjoyed my time as a junior Rotarian in doing great things for the community and having that fellowship with a lot of folks that I went to high school with. So it's great to see that Rotary is still alive and well. I haven't had much of a chance and much exposure to Rotary when I was active duty, just because I moved around so much. But it's great to see that this is a very strong organization here in Beavercreek. So yes, I grew up in Maine, and people say, well, how did you, think about wanting to join the Air Force? Like, what prompted you to do this? My dad actually took me to my very first air show when I was 5 years old, and he took me to a place called Loring Air Force Base. Some of you may know where that is. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was just one of those places that it was almost like going to the Magic Kingdom for me when I went there. I was 5 years old. My dad took me to this air show, and I just watched these people walking around in blue uniforms, looking so proud and looking like they belonged to something bigger than themselves. And it was just something that I just wanted to do. And I said, you know what, I do want to do the military thing. The interesting thing is that I said, okay, well, I wanted to go to the academy. That didn't quite work out. So I said, well, I'll go to school, I'll go to college, and I'll do the ROTC thing, which seemed like a very feasible thing for me to be able to get into the Air Force and still be able to get commissioned. And the funny thing is I actually went to see the Navy first, which I'm not really sure why I did that, because all along I said I was going to join the Air Force. And then I went and I went to the Navy ROTC. And so they said, well, okay, well, this is what you would be required to do. And at the time I was actually a business major. I wasn't a nursing major. And they said, well, you'd be doing this, and these are the kinds of jobs that you might have in the Navy. And my question to them was, well, how long do I need to spend on a ship at any given time? Well, first I said a boat. They corrected me quickly and said, that's not a boat, it's a ship. Okay, got it. And they said, okay, so what, these are the, I'm sure that how much time I really want to spend out on the water. I like the water, but I'm not really sure how long I'm going to really appreciate it. And they said, well, about 6 months at a time. And I said, oh, thanks, I'm out. And I left, and I went straight to the Air Force, and that's where I ended up finding my home in the Air Force community. So I was on the 5-year plan. So Dad, you understand what that's like when your kiddo starts talking about changing majors, right? Yeah. And so that's what happened to me. Is I started out as a business major and found out that wasn't quite for me. And I ended up taking a nursing degree, and the Air Force was like, "Ooh, you want to be a nurse? Do you want some money for it too?" And we were like, "Yes, absolutely. This is great." So they gave me a scholarship for a couple of years because I had converted to becoming a nurse. So after the 5-year plan, my first duty assignment was at Luke Air Force Base in Arizona. So for any of you who've ever been there before, for a girl from Maine, to move to Arizona was a bit of a culture shock and temperature shock. So I left at the end of April or August, and it was 55 degrees and raining in Maine. I took a 4-day trip, and I got to Arizona, got there at 7 p.m., and I opened up the door, and the only words that came out of my mouth is, "Oh dear God, I've moved to hell." It was 130 degrees outside, and I thought, oh, or this is just like, this is too much for me. So it was interesting, it was for the first 6 months, learning to, number one, be an Air Force officer, learning my job to be as a nurse, and living in a part of the country that I never imagined that I was ever going to ever live in. And so like just different than what I had been used to growing up. So I started out, and when I came into the Air Force, they said, okay, well, you got a choice as a nurse. They said, hey, you know, do you want to be a med surg nurse or do you want to be an OBGYN nurse? You know, the birthing the babies thing. And I was like, well, I want to be an ER nurse because I had done EMS for a really long time. And that's what actually got me through school. So emergency medicine was kind of my background. They said, well, I don't think you heard us the first time. You said you got two choices, medical, surgical, or OBGYN. And I really didn't want to have any part of screaming. So I kind of went the med surg route and did that for a little while, but I didn't stay there very long. I actually ended up becoming an ER nurse about a year and a half after I had joined, and it was a great experience for me, and I learned a lot of time management when you're the only nurse for 30 patients. And that's the way it used to be back then. It's not like that anymore, but that's a good thing. Things have changed, and that's a great thing for you in healthcare, that you have more people taking care of you, which is a very good thing to have. And so I did ER nursing for a little while, but the one thing I always wanted to do when I came into the Air Force and the entire time I was in ROTC is I wanted to be a flight nurse. And that was the one thing that I was like, oh, if I could just do this, then, you know, my life would be complete. And I got the opportunity. They called me and said, hey, do you want to go to school to be a flight nurse? And I said, when am I leaving? They said, tomorrow. Okay, so I packed up my car and I drove down to San Antonio, and I spent about 2.5 months there going through flight nurse training and survival school and doing all of that. And I thought, wow, you know, wouldn't it be great if I could actually do this for a living, like not just get the education, but do this for a living. And when I got back, my chief nurse came up to me and she was like, congratulations, you got an assignment. And I said, yeah, I know. I actually talked to another chief nurse. I'm going to Scott. She said, no, you're going to Germany. And I said, I'm going to Scott in Illinois. And they said, no, you're going to Germany. This is what the life of military. For those of you who have been in before, you understand that, you know, you really don't own your life. Other people do, and they kind of tell you where you're going to go. And sometimes you have a choice and sometimes not so much. And so it's like, oh, I'm going to Germany. Okay. Now, the only country I'd ever been to was Canada, which was really kind of just an extension of us. So really didn't really, you know, play a whole lot of part. And I was like, well, going to a new country, going to a new place. So I went to Germany, and I actually flew there for almost 4 years, had a wonderful time being an actual flight nurse, doing, you know, the actual care on these fixed wings that you see flying around here every single day. You see that huge C-17 that does touch and goes all the time around this base. That was one of the airplanes that I flew on. Not at that time, though, because the C-17 wasn't in existence. But we had things like the C-9, which was that beautiful, we called it the Nightingale, a great aircraft. All pretty white with a nice big red cross on the tail, which you go into a hostile environment, that just becomes a target. It's not so pretty anymore. So, you know, we did a lot of going in and out of, at the time, Kosovo was kicking off. And so we had a lot of the Bosnia conflict, and you've heard things with Bosnia before. And so I did a lot of missions in and out of Hungary and Bosnia and a lot of those countries in the Baltics. During that conflict. So that was really kind of my first sense of, wow, this is like, no kidding, this is for real. And back in the States, people weren't really hearing a whole lot about that because it really hadn't touched us yet in the US, right? And so really my very first experience of terrorism was, I was there for the Kenya bombing. So I offloaded those patients to take them to launch school. And so that was the first time we'd ever heard like these significant terrorist events that were happening overseas. And then while I was there, we also had the USS Cole bombing. And I was the medical crew director. I was, as a matter of fact, this was the very first time that we heard about something before CNN did. And so the bombing had occurred in Yemen on the USS Cole. And we received a phone call, and I happened to be in the commander's office at that time. And I had a meeting with him, and the phone rang, and he picked up the phone, and he got off the phone and he said, Carrie, I need you to go home right now. It's like, oh, okay, sir, like, what, did I do something wrong? He's like, no, I need you to go home. I need you to get some rest. I need you to pack a bag. I don't know how long you're gonna be gone for, but I need you to take this cruise. Okay. So he told me a little bit about what was going on. And then we heard it on CNN and I was like, oh, this is like, no kidding, this is for real. And to fly to a place like Yemen where we had never been there before. And it was a hostile environment at that point. We really had no idea what we were going into. We had never been there. Security wasn't so great. And so we were able to get the patients staged in an area right on the flight line. So all we could do is go in, pick them up, and then fly them back out. I was the first person that walked into that room where all of those patients were in there. And the feeling of gloom and doom that I felt when I walked in there, to see these people that were still covered in fuel. I mean, they had been involved in a blast, so they were covered in soot, they were covered in fuel, and they had just seen many of their shipmates die, and they were devastated. And I walked in there, and the first person lifted up their head, and the first thing they saw was the flag on my shoulder. And they said, we're safe. And at that point, it was like the telephone game. They tapped each other on the shoulder, and it was all around the room, and they all looked up. And at that point, you could just see the transition. And it was, for me, just, one of those days that they always told us in flight school, you'll know the day that you earn your wings. And that was that day for me. That was that day to be able to pick up all of those sailors and bring them home to safety and be able to provide them with the care that they deserve was just absolutely amazing for me. And so, I got done with my stint in Germany, and I got afforded the opportunity to go to USAF-SAM, so the United States Air Force School of Aerospace Medicine, and at the time was at Brooks Air Force Base down in San Antonio to go teach. And I was like, wow, this is another dream job. Great. So I left Arizona, I left Germany, and I went to teach in San Antonio, and I absolutely loved it. I taught the flight nursing course, I taught our critical care air transport team courses, and I also taught the expeditionary medical support courses. And it was such a great thing to be able to do. And so I did that. Had a short stint being an executive officer for a wing commander at the time, which I didn't want to do. And so the wing commander calls me, and he used to be the commander at USAF-SAM, so he knew who I was. And so he called me and he said, so you're going to apply for this position, right? And I said, well, sir, yeah, I don't learn lessons very easily. So he said, you're going to apply for this, right? And I said, sir, I'm having a great time teaching, and I really want to stay in this job. And he goes, I don't think you're really hearing me. You're going to apply for this job, right? It's like, oh, okay, yes, sir, yeah, okay, guess who got the job, right? So I ended up being the exec for a little while, which was a lot of fun after the fact. And I learned a lot in that position as well. And then I was told, hey, since you're a wing exec, and that's a lot of work, you know what? You get the assignment of your choice. And I thought, oh, you guys, wait, do you really mean that? Wait a minute. But I bought into it, and I was like, okay, great. I'm going to go to Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. That's where I want to go. And they said, congratulations, you're going to Keesler Air Force Base in Mississippi. Wait, that's not Eglin. And they said, well, it's close enough. It's 2 states away. Now it's not really close enough. So I ended up being an ER nurse again, doing that for a little while. I deployed while I was at Keesler. And the interesting thing is on the week that I was supposed to come back home from my deployment, we couldn't come back home. Katrina had hit. And our base was completely underwater, and the surrounding area was completely underwater. And they said, okay, well, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, now's my shot. They're going to send me to Eglin now, right? So I was still hoping for it. And when we got back, well, first of all, we flew into Baltimore after, we had been deployed for 6 months. We fly into Baltimore, and Baltimore, they're like, oh, yeah, by the way, none of you are going home. we have nowhere to fly you. There's no airfield that's like available for you guys to fly you. So, find a ticket. We don't care where you go to a ticket counter somewhere, but you go anywhere, but you're not going home. Okay, so I ended up flying to Eglin. For a little while. I was like, well, maybe. And they said, okay, now you guys can finally come. About a week later, I said, come on back. So we got back to Keesler, and I was seeing everybody's like, okay, you're leaving. And they point to me and they said, you're staying. So, what do you mean? And they said, we need you to rebuild the ER. Okay. So the ER had been completely underwater. We had moved 5 times before we finally got back to our final resting place of where it is today. And we basically I had to rebuild an entire ER after it had been, completely underneath a lot of water. So that was very interesting times, but I'll tell you, it was a grueling year. If anybody has ever rebuilt something after it's been flooded under a lot of water, there's a lot of headaches that go with that. And so I was like, oh man, if I could just get to Eglin. And then this call came out and they said, you know what? You have an opportunity to go to the White House. I thought, you know what? At this point, I'll sign up to go to Thule Greenland to suck the winds out of a 130 right now just to get out of this place. No problem. I'll sign up for it, thinking this is never, ever going to happen. And so I get a phone call back a couple of weeks later that says, congratulations, we'd like you to come to Washington, D.C. and meet with us. And that way we can see if you're a good fit for us. And, we're a good fit for you. And I was like, wow, okay, trip to DC for a couple of days? Sure, no problem. So I got there, and it was a 2 days of learning the job, learning a little bit more about what it was all about, getting to really understand, getting through the security clearance. Now, if any of you have ever been through that kind of security clearance before, like, I swear I got out of that interview and I felt like I was going to jail and I didn't know what I had done yet. Like, it was just, the only thing that was missing was the big bright light shining directly on me. But I was in a very dark room with a guy who was very stoic, very scary, asking me a bunch of questions about speeding tickets I may have had. And I couldn't remember when I had gotten them. And it was just like, oh my gosh, like it was a pretty serious interview. And so about a week later, they said, when we left, they said, well, we'll let you know, give us about a week and we'll give you a call and we'll let you know what the outcome is. The interesting thing is that we were playing softball. We were part of an intramural team. We were out playing softball and, here it is, got the game going, and we see Air Force One literally flying overhead because the president had just been in the area to look at the damages from Katrina and looking at some of the reparations that had occurred. And I was like, is this a sign? That's weird. And they're like, Carrie, there's your flight. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of weird. And I kid you not, 10 minutes later, the phone rings. And it's Cindy Wright, who is the one who had invited me to come over. And she said, hey, we're offering you the job. Now, in my head, I already knew what the answer was going to be, which was thank you for playing, but we went with somebody else. And that's what I heard. And so I was like, oh, okay, all right, well, thanks. It was a pleasure meeting you all too. And there's silence. And she goes, did you hear what I said? We're offering you the job. And I was like, what? Wait, what? Like, I just couldn't comprehend. So this was a fantastic opportunity for me and of course I accepted the job. And I did go out there and I was one of President Bush's, G.W. Bush's 4 nurses. Now, the bigger guy gets more assets, right? So the president got 4 nurses and the vice president gets 1 nurse. And so when we transitioned to the new administration, to the Obama administration, they moved me to be vice president Biden's only nurse. And it was such a wonderful opportunity for me to be able to do this job. I had such a blast. I will tell you that you get to be in environments that you would never imagine being. You're a part of conversations, not really participating, but a fly on the wall on some conversations that are very uncomfortable. And sometimes you just don't want to be there. And the beauty of this is it really gave us it gave me a new perspective of our governmental leaders and realizing that they're human beings just like you and I. And seeing them, like in their most vulnerable state as their medical provider was an opportunity of a lifetime for me. And so I really enjoyed my stint that I was there. Had great engagement with both of them. I still hear from both of them. I get Christmas cards from the Bushes every year. I get Christmas cards from the Bidens every year. As a matter of fact, Dr. Biden was just here about 3 weeks ago, and I was on a plane from Philly heading to Arizona, and her assistant calls me and says, "Hey, Carrie, please tell me that you're on a plane coming back to Dayton." And I said, "No, Marty, I'm not. I'm heading to Arizona." And it's, we're heading to Dayton right now. And Dr. Biden really wanted to see you. And I was like, what an opportunity that it would have been. But that is the friendships that you get with these individuals, because it's an apolitical position. So as an active duty member, we don't jockey for any positions. We're not appointed by the administration. It's just a part of our job. And so working for both Republicans and Democrats or independents, whoever's sitting in the seat, that's who we serve. And it was just such a great opportunity to be able to work with both of the administrations. Then all good things must come to an end. And then I got an opportunity to come here at Wright State. And this was another one of those things where, again, I don't listen. I don't get my lessons very quickly. And so they said, "Hey, we've got this new master's program that we'd like you to apply for." And I said, "Well, I already have a master's." And they said, "No, I don't think you heard us. We want you to apply for this master's program." So it was a new master's. It was an adult gerontological clinical nurse specialist program. But it was in disaster and flight nursing. And it was the first of its kind in the United States. So I got a chance to be able to do that. And so I was at Wright State for 2 years. I had a medical issue. I was supposed to go to Kadena in Japan. And they said, "Well, you can't go now. We've got to figure out what's going on with you first." And so I stayed here at Wright-Patterson for a little while, did the deputy chief nurse thing. So I was working in the hospital, working for the chief nurse, which was a fantastic opportunity. And then they moved me over to USAF-SAM because USAF-SAM is now here at Wright-Patterson. So this was my second stint at USAF-SAM teaching, and had a blast there. And then I thought I was going to retire, and they said, "No, I think you still got some more tread left on your tires. We're gonna keep moving you around." And so at that point, I ended up going to Pope Air Force Base and becoming a flight nurse there, where I deployed. So I was there for 6 months and then deployed for another 6 months. And while I was there, I'm the line number for colonels. So you know what happens when you're a colonel? You're at their mercy and you move around a lot. And so what happened at that point is they said, "Okay, we're going to go ahead and we're going to give you a line number, and we're going to move you back to DC." So I thought it was done with DC, and they said, "Oh no, we're going to send you back for another round," where I did the Air Force Medical Service. I was the chief of strategy for the medical service. So I did that for about 8 months, and they said, "Oh, congratulations, you're going to Air War College." And I said, "Certainly you have made a mistake, because I've already done it correspondence. I shouldn't need to have to go do it in residence." And they said, "No, you're going in residence." So I went to Montgomery for a little while and did that, and got yet another master's there. And then at that point, I ended up at the Air Force Inspection Agency. Did that for 3 years. And then I said, "You know what? I've had enough. It's time for me to go back home." And that's exactly what I did. So I came back to Beavercreek, where this is my home now. And I had a lot of, I had varied experiences dealing with dogs, transporting them because they are military members. They have their card carrying members, just like we are card carrying members. So we transported a lot of these military working dogs that got shot or injured while they were on operations. And so I had that background already. And I also trained service dogs while I was at Air War College. And so I said, you know what? I think I want to do something with dogs. And my last deployment was a relatively rough one. And I said, I need to do something different. And this is why I want to become a dog trainer. And people are like, yeah, but you got a doctorate in nursing. You want to be a dog trainer? I'm like, yeah, this is my therapy. This is what I do. And the beauty of that is being a nurse allows me to be able to see when people are saying, I need my dog to do this for me. I know exactly how to train that dog and meet that person's needs. So it's a wonderful opportunity for me. So doing that as my business, and then also working for Ohio State University. I'm busier now than I was when I was active duty. But the nice thing about that is nobody's telling me what to do. I get to do it because I want to do it, which makes it even, much more, much different. So that is me in a nutshell. Anybody have any questions? Yes, sir.
When were you at Pro?
When was I at Brooks? I was there from 2001 to 2004. Were you there?
Earlier.
Earlier than that. Got it. Well, I'll tell you that when I was there, not much had changed. So it probably would have looked the same. It doesn't look the same now.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, where Brooks is, there's a humongous Walmart there. It's all part of the city now. So you wouldn't even recognize it anymore.
Out of stupidity and curiosity, why does the president need 4 nurses and a doctor and all that? What is that role? What is that job?
So part of what we do is we cover them medically. So they are afforded 24/7 medical coverage. That includes overnight in the residence, in the Oval, when they go out on, anywhere in the city. So every time they're on the move, there's always a medical person that is covering them. Now, from a presidential standpoint, they get more resources. So there's always either a physician or a PA that covers along with a nurse every time they move somewhere. In the residence, a lot of times it's whoever's available. So it could be a nurse, it could be a PA, it could be a physician. And what we also do is we provide the emergency action plan. So for example, if one of them was to fly here to Wright-Patterson, there would be somebody who would be coming ahead with Secret Service and planning the emergency route, talking to fire, talking to EMS, talking to the hospitals that they are most likely going to do. So part of my job as an advanced person was to go to, like, let's say Miami Valley, and I would go in, I'd say, okay, this is how we're going to come in. This is the trauma bay that they were going to go to. This is the doctor that they were going to have. We would go to the CAT scan. We know where the CAT scan is, go up to the ICU. This is the room that we're going to have. This is the physician that is going to be covering. I mean, like, to that kind of detail. So it does require a lot. And the footprint is much bigger from the president versus the vice president. Yeah. Any other questions? Oh, 1 o'clock, right on the dot. You're very welcome.
Jonathan, to answer your question, have you seen the age of our last 2 presidents? Yeah. And the age of the ones running again? No. Okay. Let's see here. We have next week, thank you for doing the brief sheet. We have Charles Curran and Dave Jarvie as our greeters. Our speakers are Justin Johnson and Vaughn Legend with a program called I'm So Ohio. And then, keep an eye out on beavercreekrotary.com. The Facebook is a reminder, Monday coffee at 7 a.m. at Dunks. Please register for the Founders Dinner. Alex Zaharis going or retirement celebrations at 4 over at Stonehill Village. I think that's all I've got. Anything else for the good of the club? Okay, Carrie, would you mind leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Oh, my. Oh, there it is. Pledge allegiance to the Lord, the United States.
This is a for the chance
one day, we're individual, with liberty and justice for all.
I also forgot to mention, we do have a book. She signed it. We'll be donating this to the Beavercreek Library. Thank you, Beth, for making it happen. So, y'all have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you. That's,
That's true.
well, right next door. That's the word.